Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Libya's NTC forces retreat in Sirte after fierce resistance by Gaddafi loyalists. Bahraini opposition unites to denounce the country as a police state. And Iran accuses the U.S. of wagging the dog. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
A high-ranking military official with the Libyan National Transitional Council forces in Sirte denied the rumors circulating that Mu'tasim Gaddafi, son of Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi, was captured in the city. Yesterday evening, an NTC advisor asserted from Tripoli that Mu'tasim, who was a commander in the former regime's security forces, was captured. It is worth mentioning that before the rumor was denied, news of al-Mu'tasim's arrest generated great joy in several areas of Libya, as Misrata residents took to the streets with celebratory gunfire. On the ground, Agence France Presse quoted NTC fighters saying they were forced to retreat nearly 2 kilometers in Sirte due to the heavy gunfire of Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi's loyalist forces. The loyalist forces are putting up stiff resistance despite being besieged in a small area of Sirte.
Even before the capture of Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi's son was announced, NTC fighters in Sirte were joyously firing gunshots in the air. This is how they ended a day of fierce battles against the remaining fighters of the missing colonel. Their day began with concentrated shelling with tanks, rocket launchers, and missiles targeting northwestern parts of the city. They are certain that al-Mu'tasim al-Gaddafi was hiding there.
Of course, Sirte is completely besieged. The small area, only a kilometer, is surrounded from 3 directions. From the east, of course, by the revolutionaries of the eastern region, and from the north and west by revolutionaries from Misrata. And the sea is ahead of them, of course. And why is the war this fierce? Because it is said that al-Mu'tasim is here, along with some important leaders from Gaddafi's former regime.
A few moments later, the shelling stopped and orders were given to push toward the target area. Large parts of the city, while destroyed and free of residents, seemed safe. Other parts, obviously, are still witnessing fierce fighting. Libya's NTC forces have advanced far into the city of Sirte. This is the first time in 3 weeks that they have reached this area. They are besieging Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi's loyalist forces in this square, which extends from here to the coastline approximately 2 kilometers. Ferocious battles are ongoing in this square. It appears that Colonel Muammar al-Gaddafi's forces are putting up stiff resistance from inside, but NTC fighters confirm the battle is estimated to end within hours. As the day ended, the NTC forces were not able to achieve the victory they had been seeking for nearly 3 weeks. More casualties were incurred from the battleground. The number of casualties is not certain yet, but medical sources say it is high. Those leaving the city say civilians are still hiding there. The other camp's losses remain uncertain, but the news of al-Mu'tasim's arrest and the great progress achieved by the NTC forces indicate that the resolution of the battle is very near. Faraz Kalani, BBC, from the city of Sirte.
Five Bahraini opposition groups released a political statement called the Manama document, outlining a program to resolve the country's crisis. Media sources reported that the Secretary General of the Haq Movement for Liberty and Democracy, Hassan Mushaima, who was detained in the regime's prison, was transferred to a military hospital in a coma. The Bahrain Forum for Human Rights held Al-Khalifa's regime responsible for the safety of Mushaima.
Inspired by the rebelling public's 8-month-long uprising, 5 Bahraini societies issued the Manama document to resolve the crisis rocking the country. They considered the document a path to Bahrain's freedom and democracy.
The Manama document is a joint statement issued by 5 political societies charting Bahrain's path towards freedom and democracy.
Reform within the constitutional monarchy is the most prominent article of the document. In addition, it entails the establishment of a free civil society and the preservation of freedoms. The way in which authorities deal with the document is what will decide its fate.
To make Bahrain a democratic and progressive country under the constitutional monarchy, the opposition will work to strengthen democracy and freedom, and to form political parties and establish free civil societies and organizations on the basis of respecting and protecting human rights and freedoms, as well as opening more channels for individuals and communities to express their opinions.
The slogans raised by the protesters in Bahraini cities and villages help to bring this document to light. It explores ways to resolve the crisis, respecting the people's will in a parliament that does not exceed its legislative and monitoring privileges, an elected government representing the people's will that is held accountable, an independent judicial system, security institutions in which all Bahraini social sects participate, reviewing the security guidelines of these institutions so that their only mission is to provide safety and not repress the people.
We have the courage to say that we do not want a religious country in Bahrain. Anyone with courage should say they don't want a dictatorship. Why doesn't the Prime Minister, who has been in office for years, just come out and say, I want dictatorship? This way Bahrain will continue its tyrannical rule.
Parallel to that, the Manama document discusses 3 issues that need to be resolved. First is the issue of political naturalization, which threatens the demographic composition of Bahrain and fuels sectarian and tribal discrimination by authorities. In addition to that is a consensus on a media policy that strengthens national unity. On the ground, protests continue with the same goals, condemning the continuous escalation of security operations by the Bahraini authorities backed by the Saudi occupation, and demanding the release of detainees and prominent figures. The Bahraini Forum for Human Rights expressed deep concern for the health of Hassan Mushaima, Secretary General of the Halt Movement for Liberty and Democracy. Mushaima was undergoing a 2-year medical treatment before the authorities arrested him and denied him the right to continue treatment. The forum held the Bahraini authorities responsible for his safety. A demonstration was staged in the Balad Qadam area in solidarity with Mushaima, whose health has deteriorated in detention.
Saudi Arabia's foreign minister has accused Iran of involvement in an alleged assassination plot against the Saudi ambassador in the United States. Saad al-Faisal says there's evidence that suggests that Iran was behind what the U.S. claims to be a conspiracy to kill the Saudi envoy. Iran has strongly denied the accusations as a prefabricated scenario. Experts in the U.S. have cast doubt on the allegations against Iran. The Saudi minister's remarks against Iran come as Riyadh itself has been frequently accused of committing crimes in Bahrain and meddling in Yemen's internal affairs. The Saudi human rights record is also bleak. Activists say women's rights are widely violated in the kingdom, which is the only country where women are banned from driving. Meanwhile, a senior Iran Foreign Ministry official has urged Saudi Arabia to remain vigilant about what he calls U.S. pre-planned plot against Tehran. Deputy Foreign Minister for Arab and African Affairs, Hossein Amir Abdullahian, says Washington allegations are baseless and untrue. He made the remarks during a meeting with the Saudi ambassador to Tehran. He said Washington is seeking to divert attention away from its, quote, warmongering policies around the world. Well, many experts reject Washington's allegations that Iran is behind a plot to kill the Saudi ambassador to the U.S. as nonsense. This is even Fox News, which is widely considered pro-conservative, has cast doubt on the whole story. In an interview with the channel, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer said an FBI insider told him the dubious terror plot was likely manufactured by the Obama administration.
What is your take on this alleged terror plot involving Iran? Is this the way the Iran intelligence agencies usually operate, engaging with somebody they thought were involved with Mexican drug gangs to assassinate a Saudi Arabian ambassador in a public restaurant in New York or Washington?
Well, it's a long way to get to a much easier target in other places, and no, I don't think so. The idea of this guy, all of a sudden, after years being a successful, by all accounts, a successful used car salesman in Texas, part of the community, I would think it would be very difficult to imagine him just all of a sudden deciding that he's going to go against everything he's done for the past, for the past 15 years to do this. It does not spell correctly.
Is it possible that this Iranian American is a double agent who wanted to trick the government of the United States of America into taking some action against Iran? Is it likely that the FBI concocted this whole thing, and because it was a sting, nobody was ever in danger? There was never a real plot. This guy was plotting with FBI agents who he thought were Mexican drug lords. What does Colonel Schaefer think really went down here?
I think that's part of it. I think the reason it came out now is literally this is red meat to a bunch of lions. I think this is why they threw it out now at this point, not in September. Secondly, yeah, the FBI's had a record lately, and I did talk to one of my inside guys today, and he is saying that he thinks the same thing. You know why? Because he can't find any real information, and he's got a clearance. So that tells him that there's something going on that's extraordinary by the fact that he's an inside, investigator, knows what's going on, and yet, and I'm going to quote here, there's nothing on this within the DOJ beyond what they've talked about publicly, which means to him there's something very wrong with it.
Tens of thousands of Yemeni protesters have held fresh rallies in the capital Sana'a, demanding the prosecution of the country's embattled ruler. The protesters urged the United Nations to bring Ali Abdullah Saleh to justice for corruption and ordering the killings of hundreds of opposition activists. They also demanded that the UN freeze Saleh's assets. The demonstrators opposed any power-sharing deals with Saleh or any UN resolution which fails to meet the resolution's demands. The ruler has so far backed out of signing any such deal. His defiance to leave power has escalated anti-regime rallies that began in February. Protest organizers have planned a million-man march on Friday.
On the eve of the Friday of the Free Army, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights confirmed the deaths of 14 people. Politically, the European Union agreed to add the Commercial Bank of Syria to its lists of sanctions in protest to the repression and human rights violations in Syria.
In Syria, a violent scene continues to play out every minute before the Syrian public, amid a disregard for the Assad brigades that continue to adopt a double standard by denouncing violence on one side and committing heinous acts on the other. What happened to the citizen who was shot in the head by an explosive bullet is more proof of the Assad brigade's heinous nature. Today, Idlib topped the list of intended targets. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the Assad brigades continue to carry out military operations in the village of Benish, and that several residents were reportedly killed. Since the early morning hours, the city has been witnessing a tight siege and heavy gunfire by Assad's brigades and his Shabiha, who are backed by tanks and armored vehicles. Amid this heinous campaign, heavy gunfire was reported at the state security branch in the city as ambulances rushed to the scene to treat the injured. This news was later reported on opposition websites, confirming that several troops defected and clashed with the regime's brigades. In Homs al-Qasur neighborhood, the situation is not much different than previous days. The city is under siege and surrounded by military outposts. City streets are filled with checkpoints as security forces continue to search every civilian that passes through them and rob them of their money. The Assad brigades continue to carry out home raids and random sweeps in the Qasur neighborhood amid sporadic gunfire. The brigade stormed and besieged Homs al-Karbis neighborhood in a pre-dawn operation. They also cut off all roads leading to and from the neighborhood. More than 2,000 troops were deployed to the neighborhood, backed by tanks and armored and military vehicles. The brigades also deployed rocket launchers on building rooftops. In another related development, Assad's brigade stormed a number of schools in Homs and other cities and arrested several students from their classrooms. The brigades also surrounded the school compound in Tildo and opened gunfire at its windows and walls, following a student rally calling for the downfall of the regime. Student rallies were also staged in Latakia, Huran, Jabla, Idlib and its neighborhoods, Deir ez-Zur, Daraa, Aleppo and other cities, demanding the downfall of the regime and freedom for the prisoners. In another development, Asad Shabiha stormed the town of Nasib and opened fire indiscriminately amid reports of casualties. In Ghus al-Sham, all landline, mobile and internet connection as well as electricity and water supply networks were cut off. Opposition websites reported that the city of al-Zabadani is being placed under siege from inside the city, particularly in the areas of al-Jisr, al-Amira, Qal'at al-Zahra and Sayalan. The Assad brigade that was entrenched in the Khatir area was redeployed to the city of Zabadani. The residents of Damascus and other cities released balloons in the air as a sign of freedom and demanded the downfall of the regime and the president's execution. Today, mosque minarets in the Deir Ba'laba area of Homs were destroyed by the destructive hands of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's regime.
The mosque was totally destroyed. It was shelled. It's a total violation of the sanctity of the Imam Nawawi Mosque.
Israel is expected to publish the list of prisoners it will release within 2 days. This comes as part of a prisoner exchange deal with the Hamas movement. The implementation of the deal's first phase is expected to begin on Tuesday with the transfer of the captive Israeli soldier from Gaza to Cairo.
And Israel will release 450 prisoners. The second phase will be carried out in 2 months with Israel's release of 550 prisoners.
Our correspondent, Elias Karam, has the details.
The mother of Mahmoud, who is from the village of Mishad inside the Green Line, has not lost hope of embracing her 2 boys, Mohammed and Ibrahim. The 2 are serving 3 consecutive life sentences after being convicted of attacking an Israeli military camp and killing 3 soldiers. After 20 years in prison, the mother of Mahmoud is hoping her 2 sons will be among the released as part of the prisoner exchange deal between Israel and the Hamas movement.
God willing, God willing, God willing. If God wills it, they will be released as part of this deal, the Shalit deal, with the permission of the Lord of all creation. God forbid, if they are not released, then it will be a catastrophe. They would have in effect received the death sentence. If they are not released in this exchange deal, then they will never see the light of day.
In 2 days, certainty will replace doubt for the mother of Mahmoud when prisoners, set to be released from the desert prison of Nafha, will be gathered. The list of names will be presented to the Israeli president, who will issue the pardons. Then the list will be published to allow the routine process of objection by the Supreme Court. As for the crowning of the deal, it will take place next week when Shalit will be moved from his captivity to Cairo in coordination with Israel's release of the first group of prisoners, which consists of 450 individuals. An Israeli military delegation will head to Cairo to oversee the air transport of Shalit to an Israeli military camp, and from there he will be transferred to his hometown of Mitzpihila in the western Galilee. The Palestinian side is hoping these measures will proceed without any obstacles.
This commission has begun the preparations to start its work on the day of the exchange deal's first phase. We all hope it will complete its task as required.
110 prisoners will be released to their homes in the West Bank and Jerusalem, and 131 to Gaza. 203 will be deported and transferred either to Gaza or Arab countries via Egypt. As for their return to their hometowns, it will only be allowed after their supposed sentences end. For some, this measure means it will take 25 years to return home. As for the second phase, which included 550 prisoners, it will be implemented within 2 months. With the completion of the deal, one phase will end and a new one will begin in Israel. Its most notable features will be a raging debate over the feasibility of the deal. It ranges between supporters who say it is necessary to strengthen the resistance of the army and opponents who say it is a gift to terrorism and terrorists. Elias Karam, Al Jazeera, West Jerusalem.
The first day of registration for nominations in the elections for the Shura Council and People's Assembly saw a large turnout of candidates in various provinces to run in the first parliamentary elections since the January 25th revolution.
Local committees are accepting nomination applications at their headquarters in the courts of appeal and at their branches in other provinces. The 7-day registration will end on October 18th.
Candidate nominations began for the Shura Council and People's Assembly. 27 provincial courts of appeal and their branches received the paperwork for candidates, including workers, partisans, and farmers. They flocked here this morning to register for the individual seats, hoping to become members of the first parliament since the revolution.
I submitted the paperwork to the Chancellor so he can review and approve it, God willing.
The people are anxious as the nomination process begins. The people are more receptive and enthusiastic about the nominations, contrary to the past.
The process will be held under legal monitoring, and this is what the Egyptian people deserve. We want to prove to the world with our actual work that Egyptians are genuine people who deserve democracy in its best form.
I'm an average worker, and I would like to take this opportunity. Some are not qualified to represent the people.
Committees were formed to receive nominations for the Shura Council and People's Assembly. 5 advisors screen the paperwork and review the documents and pictures. Applicants who meet the requirements are given a receipt for submitting the paperwork. If documents are missing, the candidate must write a statement to complete it within a week of when the nomination is received.
There is no reason to reject any applicant. If a document is missing, we request it brought back by the due date.
If a candidate is missing a document, we tell them what to do. For example, if a document requires paying a fee, we tell them to pay at the Treasury and bring a receipt. There's a special document issued by the security agency that each candidate needs. It is not difficult at all, and we have not rejected any application so far.
Political parties did not submit their candidate lists on the first day. It was also noted that security forces were present to prevent altercations and facilitate the entry of candidates, media outlets, and monitors from civil communities and organizations. A large number of citizens have come to submit applications in the first few hours of the nomination registration for the elections of the first parliament since the revolution. Meanwhile, judicial committees received submissions to enable the citizens to run in the coming elections. Mohammed Atif, Nile TV.
The fact that senior convicted operatives are reportedly not being included in the exchange is now being slammed by Palestinian officials from both the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. According to the al-Assad Arabic newspaper, the anger has impacted Hamas efforts to present the deal as a sweeping success. Palestinian sources told the paper that several senior agents that due to the fallout, several Palestinian officials have now already canceled upcoming speeches over the agreement, slated to be held by the Izz-ad-Din al-Qassam brigades and the Popular Resistance Committee. In related news, protesters today marched in Gaza City from United Nations headquarters to the office of the Red Cross, demanding the release of all Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails, in addition to those named in the Shalit exchange deal. Demonstrators waved Palestinian flags, as well as those of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine terror group. A large poster of PFLP leader Ahmed Sadat, who is reportedly not being included in this deal, was hung outside the office of the Red Cross. Female demonstrators held photographs of their imprisoned loved ones and demanded their freedom. Meanwhile, the agreement to secure Shalit's release could still fall apart. This warning from the Minister for Homefront Defense, Matan Vilnai, who says that the volume of intense media speculation over the perceived victors of the deal could torpedo the entire arrangement. Vilnai cautioned that if the majority of those in the Palestinian streets believe and are convinced that an insufficient number of the leaders of their struggle are to be freed, they could pressure Hamas into stopping the implementation of the deal until better terms are negotiated. The Homefront Defense Minister voiced his plea for the Israeli media and the public to hold off on debate over the deal until Gilad Shalit has been returned home. Moving now to negotiations over another Israeli citizen held in detention, Ilan Grappel. Egypt's al-Masri al-Yom newspaper is reporting that talks for the release of the dual Israeli-U.S. citizen have reached an advanced stage. Grappel was accused of spying for the Mossad and detained in Cairo in June, and his release may come in exchange for 81 Egyptian prisoners held here in Israel. This amid reports that Egyptian state security prosecutors are now planning to launch fresh charges against the 27-year-old, including incitement and the attempted arson of an interior ministry building and police headquarters in Cairo during the January uprising in the Egyptian capital. According to the report, the prosecution is basing the latest accusations on eyewitness accounts. In other news, Egyptian authorities have confirmed that Israel has officially apologized for the accidental killing of 6 Egyptian security personnel along the Sinai border. The letter of apology was issued as Netanyahu convened his cabinet to debate the Shalit deal, brokered by Egypt's ruling authorities, who played an instrumental role in negotiations. The Egyptian soldiers were killed on August 18th as the IDF was in hot pursuit of terrorists along the Sinai border, who had killed 8 Israelis earlier in the day.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.